gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's May the 8th, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined this morning by Izubee Charles and the mustachioed one, Stephen Wagner. We got to throw that in every time, sorry, as we discuss the news of the day. And guys, the news of the day is the news of the weekend. Pretty crazy weekend. I think you had a ton of football visits, and we'll talk about them here in a moment. But you had several transfer candidates passing through on official visits this weekend, big official visit weekend. And then just for sport, you had a handful of unofficial visits, which are high school players that are part of the class of 2024 that also passed through campus. So a busy weekend for Mario Cristobal and his staff and his support staff as they wind and dine all these recruits, trying to figure out who they want to be Miami Hurricanes in the case of the transfers, and then continuing to recruit the high school kids involved. Like I said, we will talk about all of that in a moment. But the reason that we are dropping that to second tier status this morning is because the basketball program got itself a commitment yesterday, and a pretty good one at that. He's FSU forward Matthew Cleveland, arguably the best player on the Seminoles team this past year, who in stunning fashion put himself into the transfer portal. And I say that because, you know, we've known Leonard Hamilton for decades, and he is a coach that usually has a firm grip on his team. These are his guys. They don't defect like this. But in this case, they've had a couple tough seasons up there in Tallahassee. Matthew Cleveland saw an opportunity to come join a program that just went to the Final Four and has the bulk of its core back, and was sold on the idea that he could be the replacement for Jordan Miller in the starting lineup. And so we'll see how that plays out here as things go forward. But Matthew Cleveland committed to the Hurricanes yesterday, and he will be coming to Coral Gables in Izubee. That was your baby. You covered that story. You spoke to Matthew Cleveland. Talk to us about your impressions of that conversation. People can read the story on the website. It's there this morning, two of them actually. Give us some insight into Matthew Cleveland and what this means for Miami basketball.
Yeah, Gary, when you said he might have been the best player on FSU's team last year, he was definitely the best player on FSU's team last year. I know all the Miami fans remember him from that buzzer beater that gave the Hurricanes only loss at home last season. But Matthew Cleveland is a really, really good player. He was one of the players that I watched when Miami played 2 times versus FSU. I was like, wow, this is a really good guy on their team. If they had 4 more of him, they'd be an elite level program. Top 25 recruit coming out of high school in 2021 class. And when I asked him, like, hey, Matthew, you know, when was the moment you realized you wanted to be a Miami Hurricane? He said, the second I entered the transfer portal, it was, you know, where do I want to go? It's what schools can beat Miami, because Miami's the #1 school I want to go to right now. He said after playing them 4 years throughout the last 2 years of college, he loved the way Coach L played. He loved the way Coach L coached, and he saw how they used Jordan Miller. And with him entering the transfer portal, obviously Miami's done wonders with transfers in the last few years with Miller, Pack, Norchad O'Meara. So he believes, hey, I can be that next transfer that comes into Miami, becomes an all-ACC guy. I asked him about playing with, you know, some of the Miami players. He says, listen, they know how to win, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to be all ears, and I just want to be a part of that winning culture. And when I asked him, like, what are your goals? He's like, I want to go back to a Final Four, but I want to win it this time, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do so. So just talking to Matthew Cleveland, he seems really, really excited to come down to Miami. And speaking with him, you kind of get a sense he's kind of a Nigel Pack type of player, Isaiah Wong type of player, you know, not loud, not, you know, flashy. He just wants to get into Miami and work. And I feel like that's the type of players that Coach Larranaga has built his program around. I feel like Matthew Cleveland's going to be a perfect fit in Miami to kind of ease the pain of losing Jordan Miller.
Now, I think Matthew Cleveland and the coaches are counting on Pack and O'Meara to come back. They're testing the waters at the NBA right now. I think it's more to give them an idea what they need to work on in the next year on their games. I don't think either one really thinks they're getting drafted into the NBA right now. So there is the absolute expectation that they will be back. Of course, Wooga Poplar will be back. Bensley Joseph will be back. All the young guys that are on the team will be back. You got a couple new recruits coming in, but this is going to be a very good basketball team again next year. That's becoming pretty obvious. And they still have 2 scholarship slots, I believe, that they can use to bring in even more talent if they can find it. And from what I'm hearing, they're working hard on one kid that would be considered a high impact recruit. Kind of secret right now, but if they can get him, I think they would take him. Don't be surprised, though, if they keep one scholarship in their back pocket, because they are going to have a lot of guys that they need to replace next year, and they're going to want to have flexibility as they move forward. You never know who's going to become available at a given time, and I could see them doing that, keeping one scholarship in their back pocket so that they can have that roster flexibility. So check out those stories on the website. Big day yesterday for Canes basketball, and the 2023-24 team is taking shape. All right, so let's move over to football because, guys, we have so much to talk about, and there were so many significant visits this past weekend. Let's start with the transfers and the guys that we have stories about on the website. And Izubee, you spoke to a transfer cornerback from Vanderbilt by the name of Jadaius Richard, who visited Miami this past weekend, and like most of the visitors, left Coral Gables very impressed with what he saw. Give us a quick synopsis. People can read the story again, but just give us a little synopsis of Jadaius Richard.
Yeah, so Richard is a freshman coming out of Vanderbilt, entered the transfer portal. He's a Louisiana guy, and that was kind of the first thing he brought up. He's like, when I came down to Miami, Dennis Smith was the guy that recruited me while I was in high school while he was at La Tech, and I asked him about Coach Lance Guidry being from Louisiana, potentially playing under him. He's like, hey, that makes it 10 times better at just having someone and you can be comfortable around and, bring that Louisiana feel to Coral Gables. But the biggest thing out of the whole conversation that I picked up from him was the NFL development aspect. And he believes Coach Adai can, take him to the next level after watching what he did with Tyreek Stevenson and DJ Ivey, both getting drafted, as well as Keely Ringley from Georgia. So I believe Adai had 4 of his former cornerbacks that drafted in this draft, and that was something he was really, really big on. He didn't want to name any other schools that were kind of, he was interested in things like that, but he did say after this trip to Miami that they're one of the top programs that he will consider moving forward after this official visit. So definitely a name to keep your eye on moving forward in these next few days or weeks.
All right. And Steven, let's switch gears over to you. You spoke to Louisiana Tech transfer defensive tackle Kavy Rose. We're seeing a lot of Louisiana action here with Lance Guidry in the fold as Miami's defensive coordinator, having come from Louisiana. But he also spoke extremely highly of his time at Miami. Give us a quick synopsis of what you gleaned from him, with the understanding that people will be able to read that story as well.
Yeah. So Kaiby, to kind of put things simply, he was impressed and things did go well by all means. Now, obviously, he's got a pretty decent market out for him right now. He was really pulling in offers over the last couple of weeks. I think Miami is in a good position right now. Hopefully we'll learn more in the near future that can kind of maybe give us a little bit more detail about specifically where Miami sits. But after talking with Kaivi, it feels like the Hurricanes are in a decently good position with him. It's really hard it's really hard to firmly put your finger on where things totally sit, because Kaivi's not really a huge talker. He's someone who, really did want to keep quiet and largely keep to himself about the visit whenever we had the chance to talk to him. And, he was pretty quick in terms of the quotes that he was giving. But overall, without really diving into it too much, I would say Rose is definitely a name that Hurricane fans should keep on their radar. Again, we've got a really good story up on the website that you can check out, but Kyvie Rose, definitely a name to watch on your radar.
All right. And might as well stay with you, Stephen, because you also spoke to junior college transfer offensive lineman Amari Wiggins about his official visit that was ongoing over the weekend. Give us some insight into that one.
Yeah, now with Amari Wiggins, Miami is definitely climbing. I think they took a really good step in the right direction. He talked to us about how Miami really did make a good impression, and how a lot of the relationship that he's been able to build with Miami staff really centers around trust. He feels like, quite frankly, Miami isn't going to, they're not going to BS him. Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, they're not just going to tell him what he wants to hear in order to try to get him on campus. And from what I could tell, it seemed like this was something that he really values very highly, is a coach that he knows isn't just telling me what I want to hear in my recruitment, but they're telling me, hey, this is exactly where things sit right now. This is where we think you could be. This is what we think you need to work on. And this is what we really like about you. Now, coming from Coffeyville Community College, some of you guys may actually remember them you may actually remember them as a program that I think was briefly featured on Last Chance U as one of the rival junior colleges in one of those early seasons. He spent his freshman year at Coffeyville. Miami really, I think, made a strong impression. Like I said, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal are kind of leading that recruitment. And he's starting to think along the lines of, hey, maybe Miami could be a place that I'm going to end up visiting. Although this early on, I think that there's still a lot of other programs that he's probably going to continue entertaining. He told us that, he probably wants to try to visit LSU or Maryland at some point too. And I believe he's going to visit Illinois as well in the near future. So got a little bit of time before he's going to announce his commitment, although he will announce it no later than May 27th, he said. So that's going to be the absolute end date that we're going to look at, but I'm expecting him to continue to take more visits.
All right, and if you want to keep up with Miami recruiting, CaneSport.com is the place to be. We are hitting it every minute of every day, bringing you up-to-date stories on all of these important visits that are taking place. So if you're not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please come join our website and be part of our community of fans and take advantage of the hard work of our entire staff in pulling all this coverage together for you. Which leads me to two more guys. Stephen, we've had a lot of coverage on junior college wide receiver Shamar Kirk. After visiting Miami, he says the Canes are top 3 for sure. Give us a little insight into that one.
Yeah, Shamar Kirk, if this isn't a story that you're familiar with, definitely go read Matt's story on him. This is a guy who was working as a night security officer at, was it a Nissan power plant or a Honda power plant?
Nissan.
At a Nissan power plant.
Amazing story.
And now he's a legitimate Power 5 target who has a really good shot to play at a school like Miami, a school of Miami prestige. He's also taken visits to Texas A&M and UCF, but did have the chance to get out to Miami this weekend. And yeah, like you said, Gary, he did say that Miami's definitely top 3. I asked him what the other 2 schools are, and he kind of tried to tiptoe his way around it. I think his exact words were, "I'm not too sure," but either way, something that he's not really revealing yet. Which tells me that he's probably thinking to himself that he wants to keep the door open to maintain some sort of communication with a lot of these schools before he ends up committing. I believe it's going to be this coming Saturday. He said he wants to commit at his college graduation on Saturday, whenever he's going to graduate from junior college. And so he's already got offers from Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, and Purdue. Those are a couple of the headliners. He's visited plenty of programs already. We reported heading into the visit that we were anticipating, or that he was anticipating, that Miami was going to be the last school that he visited. I asked him if Miami is still probably going to be the last school that he visits. And he said, well, as of now, it seems that way, but he is going to keep the door open in case a program comes through and tries to, recruit him and make him an offer that he feels like he really can't pass up on. It's really difficult for me to tell just where specifically Miami sits with him. And I'm definitely not confident enough myself personally yet to put in an RPM projection kind of pointing which direction he's going to go, because I think he left things intentionally obscure in our conversation, because I think he himself still wants to take time to figure things out. But I think Miami, anytime that Miami has a player leave an official visit saying, oh yeah, Miami's in my top 3. I mean, unless that guy's Jeremiah Smith, I think you're probably feeling pretty good.
All right, there were a few more transfer candidates that visited this weekend. We are continuing the hot chase to try to track them down and get their version of events in Coral Gables this weekend. So, and one of them is Tywone Malone Jr., the big defensive tackle from Ole Miss, who's been a little elusive for us the last few days. But like I said, we are staying on that chase, and we hope to bring you some insight and stories on those visits later this morning. So stay tuned for those. As I mentioned, there were a couple of significant high schoolers that passed through Coral Gables this weekend. One of them was Tank Hawkins from IMG, and Izubee did a story, not kind of coincidentally, about IMG Academy and how the Hurricanes are hoping to maintain their solid pipeline to IMG. Even though IMG was recently sold, their coach tells us there are not going to be a lot of changes there. Their football program, which is doing very well, will continue onward the way it's been. And that means Miami will keep recruiting there. And one of those recruits is 4-star wide receiver Jure Hawkins, who took a Miami official visit this weekend. Steven, you spoke to him also. How things sounding with Jure Hawkins?
Yeah, so Miami's going to get an official visit from him. That's the big takeaway from this weekend. Miami will get an official from Tank Hawkins. His actual name is Jerrae Hawkins. That's how you're going to find him if you look him up in the On3 database, Jerrae Hawkins. He's a 5'9", 160-pound speedster. Speed is really the name of his game. Slot receiver, think almost kind of like a Ray Joseph type of guy, just in terms of, I think, the way that he would be used in kind of that, hopefully like a dynamic playmaker type of role. Penn State, Florida, and West Virginia are other programs he's got official visits locked into. And all 3 of those programs have been pushing equally hard for Jure Hawkins. Miami, Miami certainly isn't letting up by any means, but it certainly kind of feels like Miami has made their imprint on his radar, I'm chirping over my own words. Way too early to be doing this, but definitely feels like
why you're doing this, and you're not the receiver who's running 4.4 catching passes.
Hey, if I was a kid running a 4.4 second 40, I wouldn't be doing this. But
that's what Izubee says. But he couldn't run 4.4 either.
I wish.
But no, in all seriousness, Miami's a program that's kind of a little bit of a newer program to pop onto Hawkins' radar, at least in this sizable of a way. Miami had been keeping pretty regular contact with him. Kevin Beard's really been leading that one. But this week, Miami really showed him just how important of a recruit that they think he is. And we can certainly say that we know he's a priority for them if he's going to be taking an official visit to Miami. Now, he doesn't have the official visit actually scheduled. Pen hasn't been put to paper, but he walked out this weekend saying, yeah, he had been talking to Miami staff about this, and it is he does know that Miami will be getting an official visit from him. So one of Miami's 56 official visit spots is going to go to Jure Hawkins. So If you're looking for any indication of which recruits are priority recruits, well, if they're taking an official visit to Miami and Miami wants them there for an official visit, consider them a priority.
All right. Now, there was an unofficial visitor this weekend that's as big as any recruit that Miami will chase in this 2024 cycle. He is also a wide receiver. Miami's whale hunting on this one, and that is Ryan Wingo. He is as good as anybody in the country, really, as a receiver prospect. He's a 5-star. He's from St. Louis, Missouri, and he decided to take an unofficial visit to Miami this weekend, which kind of came out of left field because, like, if you go to the recruiting prediction machine, for example, Miami's not even on the radar. I mean, you got Georgia at 48.5%, Notre Dame 32.8%. It is presumed that Wingo is going to Georgia or Notre Dame. That does not affect Miami in the least. They are putting the full court press on Wingo. They got him to come down for what was supposed to be a 2-day visit. Now, positive development here for the Hurricanes in that instead of leaving on Sunday morning, like we had heard he was going to, he extended his visit through the day on Sunday and will be leaving later this morning instead. So that's a really good development for Miami. We hope to bring you more insight and information on this as the day goes forward. Izubee, this is your beat. You are all over this Ryan Wingo situation. What's going on, man? You had to be shocked also that he added an extra day.
Yeah, I've been reaching out to Ryan throughout the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and yesterday when I called him, because on Saturday he's like, "Hey, I'll be back home Sunday." So yesterday when I called him, he's like, "Hey, I'm still in Miami right now. I'll be home tomorrow. Is that all right if I get back to you then?" I was like, "Hey, man, you enjoy your time here. You can stay the week if you want to." But just hearing that from him, he sounded pretty happy over the phone. With Ryan, this is his second time visiting the University of Miami. The first time, I believe, was back in June. And I spoke with him a couple months ago as well. He says, Miami's always been a school that's always been keeping contact with him. Always, "Hey, Ryan, come down to Miami, come check it out, come check it out." And he finally decided to come check it out for a second time and liked it so much that he extended his visit by 1 day. He should be back in St. Louis a little bit later this morning, so I'll catch up with him then. But right now, I think Miami's in a better place than what most people think. Obviously, the RPM thinks Miami doesn't have a shot at all. But I do think Miami's kind of making themselves a real contender for Ryan Wingo and showing him, "Hey, we want you to be our guy." I know a lot of the fans are kind of harping on, we got to get the South Florida kids. We got to get the JoJo Traders, Jeremiah Smiths, the Wayne McCoys. But hey, there's other really, really good receivers out there, and Ryan Wingo is one of them. So I feel like after, I kind of pick his brain a little bit about how this 3-day trip to Miami went. We'll really see where, the Hurricanes stand with Ryan Wingo. But as of now, I feel like they're doing a great job of recruiting him. And I always say the biggest thing is getting a kid on campus for him to be around the staff, get familiar with the staff. Because in June, it was a completely different staff when he was here. Shannon Dawson wasn't here. A lot of the, position coaches weren't here. Kevin Beard wasn't here. So I feel like him getting on campus, meeting Kevin Beard, meeting Shannon Dawson, seeing the direction Miami wants to go in is something huge. And I feel like, Miami's doing a great job with Wingo. So stay tuned for that later this morning.
Yeah. So like I said, coming into this visit, I mean, you wouldn't have said that Miami was seriously on the radar. It was kind of like a shot. But when you get a kid to come from St. Louis down to South Florida, that's not a terrible sign for sure. And now it looks like things have gone very, very well in that he stayed the extra day. So we will have more on that developing story as we can get it, hopefully later this morning. Just to clean up some other recruiting stuff that we haven't talked about. The Hurricanes are recruiting a 2024 4-star defensive lineman by the name of T.A. Cunningham. We check in on him. We also have an update on 4-star wideout Michael Turner from River Ridge, Louisiana. He's ready to place the Hurricanes at the top of his list after getting an offer from them recently. So you're seeing a lot of these receivers are ready to jump in and play in Shannon Dawson's offense. So that's a good thing. We also caught up with Fairfield, California, 2024 4-star defensive lineman Jericho Johnson. Joe Salavea went to his school. Things obviously went well, and the Hurricanes are recruiting him very, very, very seriously. But it's not just about basketball recruiting and football recruiting. Today we have the continuation of a couple of our series. We have the Hurricanes 50-1 countdown series today. Well, over the weekend we took a look at Caleb Spencer and Ahmad Moten, and today we take a look at Jaden Harris, so number 46. So we'll be counting down these top 50 players over the next month and a half or so to help you guys get more familiar with your 2023 Miami Hurricanes that will be going into training camp sooner rather than later, man. That August start of training camp is going to come very, very fast, even though it's 3 months away. We also analyzed 5 different Miami players that have increasing expectations for 2023 and why that's the case. We also have a feature on the NFL draft and 4 states that overwhelmingly produced top-end NFL draft picks over the last 5 years. And not coincidentally, Miami recruits every one of those states very, very hard. And we take a look at how Miami is doing in those states. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is we take a look at some of the quarterbacks that are already being projected into the first round for next year's draft. And Tyler Van Dyke is a little bit of a forgotten man. Like, nobody's really projecting him to be a top-tier quarterback in next year's college football season and get drafted into the National Football League. So before we put this show to rest, guys, I want to bring you guys back in on that subject. Stephen, I'll start with you. Tyler Van Dyke, is he getting unfairly ignored by all these pundits all over the country that are focused on all these other quarterbacks and forget that going into last year before he got hurt, he was considered one of the top guys in the country, and they were talking about him as a possible first rounder for this past draft back then, and now everything's changed. Is that fair or unfair?
This is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think it's that unfair. And what I mean by that is obviously Tyler had a really good freshman season. His sophomore year was riddled by injuries, but we didn't get to see that real growth from TVD that I think a lot of us were expecting in year 2. You have a quarterback who puts up those kinds of numbers, that kind of production as a true freshman. Year 2, you're thinking, man, this might be a guy who can lead his team to 10 ball games. Now, obviously, injuries, nobody can possibly predict those. Not Tyler's fault, just a really unfortunate, unlucky break. But as far as I'm concerned, right now, the Tyler Van Dyke that we're having to assume that we're going to get at the start of his junior season is probably going to have to be the Tyler Van Dyke that we were seeing, around the time of the UNC game last season, before, the injury bug really bit and, things kind of went off the rails. I mean, we don't want the Tyler Van Dyke who was, having to sidearm balls into the ground against Florida State and was, really struggling just to physically stay in the game. But it's unfair for us to assume that he already has made this jump after a season that was really, really riddled with injuries, and a season where the offense just outright was bad. Offensive line play was really poor. Wide receiver play was really poor. So I think in order for people to assume that Tyler is going to come out and be this is going to be this superstar that he was heralded, or that he was heralded to be, or that he was expected to become, I guess I should say, heading into his sophomore year. And, that was one of the big reasons why Miami got so much love in last season's preseason AP Top 25, was thinking, man, this is going to be the year that TVD makes that big jump. Right now, we're having to assume that best case scenario, he's the TVD that we saw having a lot of success whenever he was a freshman. And that's kind of where we're going to have to pick things up until he shows us otherwise. Now, I personally think he is going to show us otherwise. I really do think that at the end of the day, I think he'll probably end up being like maybe a 3rd or a 4th round draft pick. I think that that's kind of a fair assumption. If he ends up being the number 1 overall draft pick, I mean, I think that I think that there's going to be plenty of Miami fans that are going to be fine with that too. But I think going into this season, we just kind of have to pick up with our assumptions and our hopes for TBD, where he left off after that really good freshman campaign and a little bit into his sophomore year before those injuries really started derailing the season.
Well, if he's projected as a third or fourth round draft pick, Izubee, he might come back for another year. I mean, he does not have to leave after this next season. He will have one more year of eligibility at his disposal, I guess I'll say, if he wants to use it. And I guarantee you that they would take him back. So a lot of this will still play out. But when you watch Tyler Van Dyke, Izubee, when he was playing well the last two seasons, does he have the look to you of a first-round quarterback?
I believe he does, but I also feel like that is a fair assessment for them not putting him amongst, the Drake Mays and the Caleb Williams, because obviously, like Steven said, the injuries, the production, the numbers were down. But I feel like that's a good thing for Tyler. Obviously, coming into last year, people were kind of putting him in, hey, Tyler Van Dyke may be able to win a Heisman and things like that. But we all know, we saw that offense, we saw those receivers. I don't think Tim Tebow could have won a Heisman playing in that Miami offense last year. So I feel like with kind of people, I wouldn't say doubting Tyler Van Dyke, or kind of just.
Did you have said Gino Toretta or Vinny Testaverde? You had to use Tim Tebow as your example.
I'm sorry. Some people think Tim Tebow's, the greatest college quarterback of all time. So
don't get me freaking started on that today. Do not get me started on that.
I'll say, all right. I'll say, who's the offense coordinator for the Buffalo Bills? I forgot his name.
Joe Brady.
Dorsey.
I'm sorry, Ken Dorsey. Ken Dorsey
wouldn't have won a Heisman or contended with that team last year. You get the point. But I feel like with this year, kind of Tyler flying under the radar, people aren't, putting so much pressure on him, or you're a Heisman contender, you're this, you're that. Miami's retooling. Miami got an actual offensive coordinator that's a quarterback's coach, that they're on the same page. I feel like this can be good for Tyler Van Dyke, not having all that pressure for saying, hey, you got to go win the Heisman. Hey, you got to follow up on this year. I feel like now it's simply, Tyler, go show them what you were before. There's not as much pressure on you. Just perform, and then we'll see what happens down the road.
Just need his agents to just relax, let this play out, because it could go in multiple directions. There's no doubt about it. And it might be in his interest to come back for another season, which is how I'm going to close this show, guys. I want a yes or no answer. Does Tyler Van Dyke come back in 2024 to try to improve his draft stock and get into the first round if he is not in the first round after 2023?
No,
I cannot see that happening at all.
Just accept that second, third, or fourth rounder, huh? Take what you can get. All right, we'll see how we'll see how it plays out. There's a huge difference between being drafted in the first round and being drafted in the third. Second's obviously in the middle, but you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it's going to be very interesting, in my opinion, to see how this plays out. Hey, look, like with basketball, Isaiah Wong could have come back for another year, decided to go try the NBA. I'll be very surprised, as good of a player as he was, ACC Player of the Year. I'll be very surprised if he got drafted. I thought there was a reasonable chance he would come back for another year at Miami, but I don't think the NIL dollars situation for him was big enough to justify it, I guess. So he decided to start his pro career. Maybe Tyler Van Dyke does the same. We'll see how the season goes. All right, that's going to do it for this morning for Good Morning CaneSport. It's amazing how when we give Matt Shodell the morning off, that everybody gets all their thoughts in, all their words in. Everybody gets their fair, ample time on this show. But Matt will be back, we promise, as the week goes on, for that Matt Shodell fan club out there that needs its fix of Shodell-isms. So for Stephen Wagner, Izubee Charles, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you so much for starting your day out with us. If you like this show, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. Helps us with the algorithms at YouTube, grow our channel. And like I said earlier, please, if you are not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every single day. Please join our CaneSport.com family as soon as you can. So for Stephen and Izubee, I'm Gary. We'll see you next time, everybody.